Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Photopea Basics. First things first, we're going to cover some house rules. Your microphone and video, they have been muted on purpose. If you have any questions over what we are covering today, please use the chat box at the little icon is at the bottom of your screen. I'm assisted today by my chat facilitator, Caitlin. Please say hi, Caitlin.
Hello.
Alrighty, if you have any program-related questions, please use that chat box. And we are asking you to please be respectful when making comments. Any inappropriate behavior will result in your removal from this program. And a recording of this program will be sent out at a later date, so you don't have to worry about taking a bunch of notes. Just sit back and enjoy. So I'm going to go ahead. So what is Photopea? Photopea is a free online-based software used to create and enhance photographs and illustrations. It supports many different file types such as JPEG, TIFF, CR2, and even Photoshop documents. It is very similar to Photoshop by Adobe, which is a premium paid-for service that can be quite expensive. What I love about Photopea is that it is free and web browser-based, so you don't have to pay for anything. There is an option if you would like to remove ads. You can pay for the ad removal version, but I don't mind seeing ads myself. So how Photopea edits images. There are two different methods we're going to cover today. Indirectly, by overlaying additional information on top via layers, which we will focus on later, or directly by rewriting the properties of the pixels themselves. So whenever you zoom in really, really close to a photo, you see a bunch of little squares. Those are pixels. So two different ways of editing a photo, or indirectly by adding layers on top, or directly by editing the properties of those pixels themselves. We will focus on those two methods today. So if you don't have any photos to practice with, I highly recommend going to a site called Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S. They are a free photo service that you can download images to work with. They also have videos as well. Sometimes the copyright usage has different rules, so be sure to check those out before publishing any photos. But I like to go here just to find different photos to work with and to edit. They do have some paid for only options, but most images are free to use. You can also just go over to Google Images as a source of photos, but not all of them are copyright free. So just be sure to check before you post any of those photos. Alrighty, so if you have your web browser up, go ahead and navigate to photopea.com. And this is what it's going to look like whenever you pull it up. It looks shockingly like Photoshop. It's very eerie. Alrighty, and if you have a photo to work with, you can select Open from Computer, or alternatively, File in this upper left and Open. So I'm going to do Open from Computer. And let's see here. I'm going to select a lighthouse image today. Open. And this is what your completed workspace is going to look like. A quick note, Photopea does not automatically save files to your computer like Photoshop does, because this is a web-based software. So you will have to manually save your file to your computer if you wish to exit your browser and not lose your work. So you can do that by occasionally just going up to File, Save As PSD, which stands for Photoshop document, which Photopea can definitely work with. All right, let's cover the workspace, explain what is going on here. So this top menu up here, it says file, edit, image, all that fun stuff. That is called the top menu. This is where you will find commonly used functions such as file, used for saving and exporting, edit, which you use for fill, stroke, transform, undo, copy, paste, all that fun stuff, and image, which you use for mainly adjustments, but there are some other fun tools you can use in there. Next up, it's the layers panel over here. This will be your bread and butter. This is the area for working with the layer structure of a document, which we will focus on more later, but you're going to want to pay attention to the layers you have over here. The toolbar on this far left has all of the fun tools you can use in Photopea. It contains all the commonly used tools first and foremost, but you can right-click a tool that has that little tiny line in the corner, that bottom right corner, and it will have all of the subtools in there. All right, the options bar up here will have varying customizable aspects for the tool you have currently selected. So if I select crop tool, that options bar has some different adjustments. If I select the clone stamp tool, that options bar has some different little aspects up there. And then we have the canvas front and center. This is where your image will be displayed and you'll be doing all of your work. All right, before we get started in some tools, Caitlin, are there any questions?
Not at this time.
All righty, if you guys have any questions, please put them in chat and I will happily answer them if I can. So we're going to cover adjustment layers. This is that non-destructive form of editing I was talking about earlier. And we're going to focus on brightness and some hue and saturation. So we're going to navigate to the layers panel over here. And then at the very bottom, there are some fun icons. If you hover, it will display what they are. So I'm going to select new adjustment layer because I don't want to change anything about this photo permanently. I just want to add a layer on top. So I'm going to left click new adjustment layer. And I'm going to select brightness and contrast. And if you noticed, the layer panel has another layer. And a properties panel just appeared. So with this properties panel, you can click and drag this little blue bar down or up to change the brightness of the photo. So I'm going to drag it down just a little bit. You can also adjust the contrast. And you can change the number directly by highlighting this text and typing in a number. So if I wanted to reset that to 0, I can do that. I'm going to drag that back down just a little bit. Okay. And a fun little aspect of Photoshop and Photopea, it's this little eye icon right here. If you want to see what your photo looks like before and after the changes you've applied to it, select that little eye icon. It'll turn it off, turn it back on. I'm going to drag that way down, off, and on. Very good. But let's say you don't want to apply a change to the entirety of your photo. You just want a portion of it. So I'm going to turn that layer off. And I'm going to select the rectangle select tool. It's also known as the marquee tool. Keyboard shortcut of M as in man on your keyboard. I'm going to left click it once. And I'm going to left click and drag from this upper left corner to about halfway through the photo in the lower right. So left click and drag, a little box appears. And I'm gonna let go. And then now these little dotted lines have appeared. And that's basically the computer saying, all right, this is the area we are going to edit. We're not gonna edit this other area, just whatever is in this box. I'm gonna go back down to our layers panel, and I'm gonna add a new adjustment layer again. And I'm gonna select brightness and contrast. And if you've noticed on the layers panel, there's an extra little rectangle to the right of that little brightness icon. Half of it is white and half of it is black. It's basically saying this white area is what we're editing. The black area is what we're not editing. So I'm just gonna left click and drag this down, and it applies it just to that selection. All right, you can
Hey,
left,
Hannah,
yes.
we have a question.
Awesome.
Do you know if the same keyboard shortcuts from Photoshop work in Photopea as well, or if any keyboard shortcuts work in Photopea?
I think they are eerily similar. There might be an odd one here and there. Let me double check. Actually, yeah, most of them seem on point. Yeah, I think the most common ones at least match up to Photoshop really well. So you shouldn't have to relearn too many tools. This is a web-based software, so I know stuff like Control N, Control S might not work the same because that you have to be in like a desktop version for software like Photoshop. But most of the tool keyboard shortcuts should be the same.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so you can left click and select anywhere to get rid of that little box and really look at your photo. I'm going to toggle this on and off with that little eye icon. So that's off, that's on. All righty. And how to think of layers. Think of them as sheets of stacked plastic. So you can see through the transparent areas of a layer on the top to the layers below. You can click and drag these layers around to different positions in the stack. But if you just think of them as sheets of stacked plastic, looking all the way down to your background, hopefully that helps kind of solidify layers for you. Okay, well, let's say we didn't want to stop there. We wanted an even more specific area. We don't want to just apply boxes to everything. If I wanted to just select this lighthouse, I'm going to go over to the tool bar over here and select the lasso tool, keyboard shortcut of L as in love. All right, so I'm going to zoom in because with the lasso tool, you do want to be very precise in your movement of what you select. So I'm going to select the zoom tool, keyboard shortcut of Z as in zombie. And I'm just going to left click a few times to where I'm a little bit closer. If you hold Alt on your keyboard and left click, it'll zoom back out for you. So let me zoom back in. Beautiful. Let me go back up to the lasso tool, keyboard shortcut of L. And the thing with the lasso tool is you want to left click and drag all the way around whatever you are selecting, and you want to meet up with your origin point. If you don't meet up with that little starting point, Photopea is going to try and do its best guess of where you meant to go, but it doesn't always do a great job. So as long as you meet up with your origin point, you will be totally fine. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to left click and drag. And I'm going to try to get my little lasso tool selection as close as possible to that lighthouse. And this is probably one of the more challenging aspects of programs like Photoshop and Photopea, is getting it as accurate as possible. I'm just dragging continually around that lighthouse. I met up with my origin point. Awesome. And let me see here. If you find that you have, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. If you find that you have gone a little bit out of your little comfort zone, you want it to be a little bit closer to the lighthouse. If you hold Alt on your keyboard and then click and drag into the area you don't want selected, it will take away that part of your selection. So even if you are drawing around the lighthouse and you do a terrible job, your mouse is all over the place, you can always go back and clean it up. Just holding Alt and left clicking. And then if you find that you have accidentally gone too far and you took off a chunk of your lighthouse, you hold Shift and draw a complete shape around that area that you want back. It will add it back to your selection. So holding Alt and left click and dragging will take away from your selection. And holding Shift, left click and dragging will add to that selection. All right. I'm going to zoom back out. So I'm going to press Z as in zombie on the keyboard, and I'm going to left click while holding Alt. It's going to zoom back out for me. Okay, so with my lasso tool selected, keyboard shortcut of L, so I have my lighthouse selected. We're going to do a process called feathering to make sure that this border that I drew kind of blends in as much as possible. All right, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to select modify and feather. Feather basically makes sure the border of your selection is smoother. It's kind of a gradient. You don't want to go too high on your feathering because it makes that border very, very wide and very, very, it'll look pretty photoshopped, like obviously. So I'm just going to type in 10 pixels. We're going to see how that looks. Select OK. And let's see, we're going to go back down to this adjustment layer. And instead of brightness and contrast, let's try out hue and saturation. So I'm going to bump up that saturation because I want that lighthouse to really, really pop against the landscape. Very nice. All right. I'm going to turn that layer off and on so I can see what changes I've made. So before and after, let me zoom in so you guys can see it a little better. Before and after, that red is really coming out in the top of the lighthouse and kind of that yellowish tone in the bricks. Before and after. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. You can totally go crazy if you want and really just crank up the hue, saturation, all that fun stuff. If you want a purple lighthouse, you can have a purple lighthouse. It's just majestic. But I just want a regular old lighthouse, just with a little bit of extra color. Okay. Looks pretty natural, I'd say. I didn't go too nuts with the editing. Just looks like it pops against the background a little bit more. I know I covered a lot. Are there any questions on any of those tools and processes? I can go through it again. Anything? All righty.
No more questions at this time.
Nope. Okay. You guys have any questions, put them in chat. I'm happy to go through whatever y'all need. Ooh, the next tool up you guys are gonna love. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to File, Open, and I'm gonna go to Blemish. So if you're feeling brave, you can always use your own photo. Otherwise, you can go to Pexels or Pixabay or Google Images to find something to work on. All right. First things first, whenever we are editing with the spot healing tool or clone stamp tool, anything like that, it's very important to make a copy of your background image, because this is the type of editing I spoke about earlier that is called destructive editing, where you rewrite the pixels directly and permanently. So I always like to have a little backup of the background, just in case anything goes wrong, because sometimes that happens. So I'm going to go to the layers panel where background is, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to select duplicate layer. And there it is right there. So any changes I make to this layer, if something goes horrifically wrong, I can just turn it off, delete it, and start over. Awesome, awesome. You never really want to work on the background layer itself because those changes are permanent. All right. So the spot healing tool looks like a little Band-Aid over here. It has the keyboard shortcut of J as in Jacob. Select J. And I would say I'm going to move in pretty close to the blemishes because I want this to be as accurate as possible. So I'm going to select Z as in zombie on my keyboard. I'm going to left click and get close. I'm going to select J as in Jacob to bring back that spot healing tool right here. And let's see here. A general rule of thumb is you want your brush diameter, that little circle, hopefully you guys can see, you want it to be a little bit bigger than the blemish that you're working with. You can change that size up here on the options bar by just dragging that size bar, but I prefer to use the bracket keys. So the right bracket key will increase it, and the left bracket key will decrease it. So you want to get it around just a little bit bigger than the blemish. You don't want it to be too big because it'll make the face look really funky. All right, so you got it a little bit bigger than the blemish. And simply left click and it'll go away. Let's try down here. I'm going to decrease that size just a little bit, left click, and it is like magic. All right, let's see if I can do it with this big size here. Left click. It's thinking. There we go. It's gone. Photopea does take a little bit longer to apply these effects, so don't worry if it takes a hot second. Beautiful. Here, right here. And it's just a matter of making very subtle changes, small changes gradually, because you don't want to make any very drastic changes to your pieces. Let's see what it'll do with this big piece. It might not work. Oh, very nice. Very tiny one up here. All right, I'm going to zoom back out, check the progress of our photo. So Z is in zombie, and I'm holding Alt and left clicking. Wonderful. I'm going to select the little eye icon next to our layers panel. Before, after, before, after. Wonderful. So it's just a very gradual process, slowly chipping away And now you know if you need to post any photos on your social media of yourself and you aren't comfortable with the blemish, you can just pop it into Photopea real quick, export that image, and you are good to go. Which I'll show you guys how to do that now. I'm going to go up to File. If you wanted to save this file and continue to work on it, select Save as PSD. But if you're happy with it, go to Export As, and I recommend exporting it as a JPEG. Those tend to be the most common form of images, or PNG. Go to JPEG, Save, and it will save it for you. Wonderful, wonderful. Are there any questions on that at all?
We do not have a question about the spot healing brush tool, but we do have a unrelated question.
Okay.
We had a question come in about adjusting the size of an image. So if an image is 8.5 by 11, but they want to print it larger to 8.5 by 14, is that something they can do in Photopea?
So let me play around with these tools. I think it's possible up here. Let me see. Image size, inches. The thing is, whenever you are changing the size of an image, it's always going to be harder to go up in size because there are only a certain amount of pixels that make up a photo. So if you are increasing the size of your photo, sometimes it can work because there's a bunch of pixels that compose that image. But if there aren't a lot of pixels that make up that image, going up in size may result in a blurry, kind of messy looking photo. We're going to see what happens here. So currently this photo is roughly 4 by 6. So I'm going to see if I can increase it to, let's see, 8 by 10. Actually, let me do. Okay, so it will adjust it proportionally. This looks to be a 3 by 2 photo. Let's just see what happens. Okay, so this one, it looks like there were plenty of pixels. I don't see any distorted aspects. Yeah, that one looks fine. Let's see if we can do it with this lighthouse photo. So what I do is I go up to Image on this top menu. I select Image Size. Ooh, very nice. It will tell you by default what the pixels are. I prefer to work in inches. So I select that little drop-down menu that says inches. And this is a very high resolution photo, so there will be no issue with this one. But let's just see if we can resize it to 24 inches. And it will automatically make that proportional for you. And you just select OK. It'll take a little while. Very nice. Hopefully that answers your question. Should I go through that process again?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Let's see here. I'm just going to play around in Photopea for the next few minutes. If you guys have any questions, that's pretty much the basics. Feel free to ask if you have any questions in chat. I'm just going to play around with a couple of different photos and you guys ask away. Let's see. I'm going to change one of these flower petals. So I selected my lasso tool, keyboard shortcut of L. I'm going to click and drag. Very nice. Oh, let's see here. Boop. Drag. And I'm going to feather that so it doesn't look like it's been heavily photoshopped. I right-clicked, select modify, feather. Let's say 10 pixels is pretty good. And go back down to here. New adjustment layer. And let's see, let's try black and white. Let me undo. Control Z is undo. That's a very big tool. I just went back a few steps by holding Control and tapping Z as in zombie on the keyboard. So I'm going to feather this about 5 pixels. 10 seemed to be too soft. Okay, that's better. Go back down to new adjustment layer. Black and white. Cool. Now let's turn that one off. And I'm going to draw all the way around this flower with my lasso tool, trying to keep us in line with the outside of the flower as possible. But you don't have to get it perfect the first time. So you can always go back later with Alt and Shift and add and subtract from your selection. Okay. Oops, that moment's a little bit messy. We're going to go and fix that one. Sometimes your hand gets tired if you're drawing for a long time. Okay. So I'm going to hold Alt. I'm going to left click and deselect some of those areas that I don't want included. Okay. And then I'm going to hold Shift. Add to those areas that I do want selected. Cleaning it up as I go. Okay. So I'm gonna throw you guys for a loop here. I'm gonna deselect the center of this flower. So I'm gonna hold Alt. I'm gonna left click and drag as best I can. All right, I'm gonna feather. Right click, modify, feather. 5 seems to be a good pixel range for this photo. Select OK. And go back down to our little adjustment layer here. And I'm going to select black and white. All right, so I missed it a little bit up here with the yellow, but I think that looks pretty cool. Before, after, before, after.
And hey, Hannah, we have another question.
Awesome.
So can you demonstrate how someone would save something to either their desktop or a USB from Photopea?
Yeah. So Photopea will automatically download depending on your web browser settings. So if I wanted to save this as a Photoshop document and an image, because I want to return to it later, I'm going to go up to File, Save as PSD, and I'm just going to put it right onto my desktop. That's usually my default save location, or on my Downloads folder. And it's automatically going to save as a PSD for you. So save. We'll double check that. Yep, it's in that upper little corner right there. And if I wanted to save this as a JPEG, so I could pull it up on my phone later, add it to my drive, File, Export as JPEG. and save. Now let's see, that could have gone to my downloads folder. Let's see. Yes. So my Google Chrome settings are set up to go directly to my downloads folder. So if I wanted to move that to my USB drive, I usually just do cut, right click, cut, and paste. All right. You can also change your Google settings to download directly to a USB drive, but I usually just copy and paste anyways. Hopefully that answered that question, but if not, please ask it again and I will happily try my best. Let's see here. Oops. Let's toggle that one off and on. All right. What other fun tools do we have? The brush tool is very fun to just play with. Select B as in boy on your keyboard. Click and drag. And you can just draw away. Control C. And let's make a new layer, because if you notice, I was drawing on the background layer, and that is just sacrilege because I am directly rewriting those pixels. So I don't want that to be a permanent change. I'm going to select new layer. And then I can draw wherever I want. Wonderful. I'm going to drag this layer above the black and white layer. Because if I have it below that black and white layer, it's going to apply those changes kind of like that, those sheets of plastic metaphor I was giving y'all earlier. Just going to pull that back up here. I'm going to select E for the eraser tool. E as in Edgar. I'm just going to click and drag to erase. I'm going to increase my eraser tool size with those bracket keys. Okay. And you know what? I think this needs some text. So I'm going to select the type tool, keyboard shortcut of T. And let's see here. I just left clicked, typed out test, or let's see, hello world. Now I'm going to change the color by left click and dragging and selecting this little black box up here that is on the options bar. And I'm going to go with a nice purpley pink. Beautiful. I'm going to increase that size up here on that options bar. Very nice. And change that font. Select that little check icon to confirm. And there it is. All right, that about does it for this class. Are there any other questions today?
We had someone ask about the what the bracket key does again.
Bracket key, it changes your brush diameter size, whether you are using the eraser tool. I'm going to change that size with the bracket key, makes them bigger or smaller. Or if you have the brush tool open, let's see, those bracket keys will make it bigger or smaller. And if you're using that spot healing tool, it does that as well.
We have another question.
Awesome.
Now this one I think could be subjective, but do you think TIFF is better than PNG or JPEG?
TIFF is what is referred to as a raw photo file. So for really fancy cameras, like those ones with the huge lenses you see by Nikon or Canon, those are the top two brands out there. TIFF is a raw file, so it's basically bigger. It has more data in it, more information, so it will be a much larger file size. I tend to work in raw images whenever I take photographs on my big old fancy camera. But the only downside is a lot of computers or phones have trouble reading, or I'm sorry, pulling up raw image files such as TIFF and CR2 because it's a different file type. JPEGs and PNGs are compressed images that pretty much every phone, every computer, every device can read very easily. It can pull up JPEGs and PNGs very easily. TIFFs and CR2s, you typically have to be on a computer that has a type of photo viewing software that is capable of pulling up those images and reading them. So I do recommend if you have TIFF or CR2 files, use those to edit. But you're going to always want to export as a JPEG or a PNG if you want to post it and have people be able to view it on their smartphones, on their PCs. I hope that made sense.
I believe so. I thought that was a great explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to export this one. File, export as JPEG, save. There it is. Any other fun questions today? Anybody have anything they would like answered? All righty, well, thank you all for coming to Photopea Basics. I would like to add our service in called Book a Librarian. If you guys have any other questions for this program, if you have any, photoshopping questions in general, please fill out our Book a Librarian form. We will do a 30-minute one-on-one virtual session. It's not just limited to Photopea or Photoshop. If you have any other questions as well, just fill out that form and we will contact you and set up a 30-minute one-on-one session tutorial with you. All right, thanks for coming, y'all. Bye.